Hi, it's time for another verb of the day. Today's verb is beat. Let's take a look at some of the definitions or ways that we use this verb. The first way you might hear the verb beat used is to mean to defeat someone in a game, a competition, or possibly an election. You'll hear this verb used to describe what happens in various athletic competitions, other games, and even sometimes in the workplace. You might beat someone for a promotion, for example. A second way you might hear the verb be used is to mean to strike someone or something repeatedly. So I'm sorry this definition has kind of a violent, really negative meaning to it, but again, you might read it if you're reading a news report describing an attack or something that happened to another person. A third way you might hear the verb be used is to mean to make a rhythmical sound by being struck. We oftentimes use this verb to describe what a person does when they play the drum, right? Maybe you can hear that sort of tapping or beating sound, right? So that's what's being meant by that. A fourth way the verb be used is to mean to pulsate. And this has a very specific usage. So it's connected to our heart. Our heart beats, right? It pulsates is what that means. So we can use that to describe any living creature that has a heart. A fifth way to use the verb beat is in cooking. This means that someone is stirring rather vigorously. They're doing it with a fork, a whisk, or even a beater. This is a noun. It's describing a tool that's usually part of a mixer or mixing unit. You should know that beat is an irregular verb. To make the progressive tense, all we need to do is add ing to form beating. But the past tense form of this verb is actually the same as the present tense. So it's got the same spelling, B-E-A-T, and the pronunciation is exactly the same, right? So if I uttered the sentence, I beat him, I don't know if I'm describing a habit or if I'm talking about a completed action without some more context. The participle form of this verb is beaten, so we're adding an en to the end of it. Now we're going to turn our attention to some phrasal verbs with beat. Now, as you can see from the note in the upper right-hand part of the screen, we're going to focus on a number of different phrasal verbs today, so we won't do any separate verb tense practice, but I'll try and note the verb tenses that are being used in example sentences. Let's take a look at our first phrasal verb, beat against. This means to repeatedly strike a person or a thing. An example of this could be the question, who is beating against the door? Right? This is an example of present progressive or present continuous. It's describing an action that's happening right now. A second phrasal verb you might hear is beat back. And this means to drive someone or something back to where it came from. You might see this phrasal verb used in historical accounts or records, and it might be in a sentence like this example. The army beat back the invaders. So whatever group or maybe a country's military tried to invade or come into another territory, the forces in this particular location were able to drive them back to where they came from. The next phrasal verb we'll look at is beat down. This can have a couple different meanings. One is to exhaust. An example of this is a sentence I've heard many teachers say, online teaching has beat me down. It's exhausted me. Because it's very different, and the demands and the amount of time it takes sometimes is much greater than live or in-person classroom teaching. A second way to use the phrasal verb beat down is to mean to strike with great force and or to strike repeatedly. So there are instances where beat against and beat down might be used interchangeably. An example of beat down could be the rain has been beating down our roof all day. So in this context, it's the rain might feel really loud, really forceful, and it's been falling or hitting the roof all day. So that's that repeatedly. The next phrasal verb we'll take a look at is beat in. This means to add or mix in. So you might see this used in recipes, like the example sentence, next, beat in 2 eggs and mix to combine. Now, my last example here, beat in 2 eggs, is an example of an imperative. So here I'm giving a command. There is no stated subject in that sentence. And I realize now as I'm talking that I've sort of forgotten to go through all the different examples. So let me go back a little bit here. The army beat back the invaders. This is likely describing a simple past tense situation, something that's completed. Online teaching has beat me down is an example of the present perfect. Have been beating down is an example of the present perfect progressive. So hopefully all of those help. But let's continue looking at some other phrasal verbs. The next one we'll look at is beat into. This can have several different meanings. I picked out 2 for us to look at. One is to mean to force someone to do something, and you're usually forcing them to do it by violence or making a threat of violence. An example of this: the hero beat this villain into submission. So this might be describing something that happened in a movie or a book. And here our hero is using force or violence to get the villain to give up, no longer be the threat to the person or community. A second way to use beat into is again related to cooking. So here we're adding a substance to another mixture. An example of this, you might imagine someone who's demonstrating a cooking technique or how to make something on TV or on YouTube, right? And they might say something like, next, we'll beat the butter into the pancake batter. So there's already maybe some flour and egg and milk mixed in, and now this other ingredient is being added. The next phrasal verb we'll look at is beat out. This means to perform better than someone. Again, this kind of connects back to that first definition of the verb we looked at earlier. He beat out 3 contestants to win the prize. The last phrasal verb we're going to look at is beat up. And this can have a couple different meanings. The first is to violently hurt someone by hitting them repeatedly. An example could be the robbers beat up the homeowner before they stole his belongings. So they hurt this person before they took valuable possessions. The second way you'll hear beat up used is where beat and up are going to be separated. And generally what you're going to see is a reflexive pronoun between the 2 words. So a reflexive pronoun would be myself, yourself, himself, herself, themselves, yourselves, plural, ourselves. So here, the second meaning of beating someone up is generally meaning feeling badly or guilty. So in some ways, it's almost like we're hitting ourselves emotionally to the point where we're hurting ourselves. So you might hear it kind of like this. Don't beat yourself up over such a small mistake. Right? So we might imagine someone made a mistake. Oh, I'm so stupid. I'm an idiot. Right? So then say, whoa, whoa, whoa. Don't beat yourself up. Don't feel so bad. Don't feel guilty. Don't call yourself names. Like, relax. Okay? So now let's take a moment to review some of the verb tenses we used in these example sentences. In the first, I would say this is another example of simple past tense, something that was completed. even though there's not a stated time period here. The second sentence, will beat the butter into the batter. This is an example of simple future using will and beat. Beat out, here is also another example of simple past tense. This action is completed, as is the next one after it. Again, simple past tense really lends itself well to this. And the last thing is an example of a negative imperative. So it's a negative command, telling someone not to do a particular action. Now let's spend a few minutes looking at words that are related to our verb beat. And the first word we're going to look at is just the noun form of this word. So again, same spelling, same pronunciation. This can have a number of different meanings. We're just going to look at 3 that I think maybe are more common for you to encounter when you're reading or possibly to hear. The first way you might hear the noun beat used is to refer to rhythm in music or poetry. An example of that, this song has a great beat. So the rhythm to the music. Maybe it makes you want to dance. It's sort of catchy, puts you in a good mood. Whatever you determine to be great is what that's describing. A second way to use the noun beat is, again, to refer to the pulsation of the heart. Okay? So an example of this, my resting heart rate is 60 beats per minute. So here it's plural because it's more than one, but this is certainly a noun usage in this sentence. Another way you might hear beat used, and I feel like this will be common in movies, TV shows, etc., especially if you like crime-related things, is to refer to an area that has been assigned to a police officer for that officer to patrol or to watch and observe. An example of that, the officer's beat is on the north side of town. So the area that the officer monitors is on the north end of this particular town. You should know that the word beat, B-A-T, can also be an adjective. This adjective tends to be rather informal, but it's the state of being exhausted. Here's how you might hear it used in a sentence. She was beat after working a 12-hour shift. So very long day. She was exhausted. Just another way to say that. And the last word we'll look at today is the adjective beatable. You might hear this in talking about sports and other competitions, but it means able to be defeated in some sort of game or other competitive situation. Here's an example. You might hear a coach tell her players, our next opponent is very beatable. Right? We should be able, or we are able, to defeat this opponent. Thanks so much for watching today's video. I hope you have a great day.